Now, okay, and I should add some explanations that I forgot to mention last time about houses and community and network, etc. And also, many of you have given me good comments and questions, which made me realize about the things I forgot to mention. And first of all, the reason why they invented, or may not be the invention, but they started this house system called pit dwelling, you know, how did they find it out? You know, to dig the ground down into subground, make floor under the ground. And there's no evidence to show the origin of this pit dwelling. But I kind of imagine, I kind of think that it's quite natural if we know about this previous house system. Actually, it's not a house, but a tent system, camping system of living in Paleolithic time. You see, well, we still don't know anything about the tent either. The upper structure of the tent should be like this. You know, this is the easiest form of the tent that we can imagine. And they could make something more complicated, but we don't think so, because they have to really move around. So it has to be really simple and easy to build, easy to collapse, and, portable things, you know. So maybe some wooden frame, and animal skin covering, and that should be it. And it may have opening on the top, at the top, so that you can build a fire inside if the tent is big enough. And if it's too small, you can't build any fire. It's too hot, you know, to be near the fire. But probably they didn't have this ventilation system and the fire inside. And that's the reason why I told you about this heating system with the stones, you know, the heated stones brought into the tent. Then you would spend overnight not freezing, you know. So probably that was the major system. And you see, this is a conical shape. Could be a round or rectangle or square, I don't know, but sort of conical shape. But the problem, the biggest problem about this tent is the space, limited space. It's very narrow, you know, the slanted roof over your head, and you cannot really stand in there. And you just have to sit or either lie down, you know, in this kind of tent. So probably for some time, maybe towards the end of a Paleolithic period, they should have thought about expanding the space, the interior space. And that's quite natural for them to think so. And the only space they could expand is down below, right here, the ground. You can dig the ground and make depression, so you could gain more space inside the tent, you see. And I think I've shown you one picture of Osaka example of the this kind of tent site. And it had the slight depression at the center, just like this. So probably that was the transition phase of the house from tent to pit dwelling. And they dug it down deeper. And as a matter of fact, not all of the Jomon pit dwellings are the same. They don't always have this solid, you know, big pit dug into the ground, right angle. But in the earlier stage, like incipient Jomon or earliest Jomon period, whenever you find a small pit dwelling site, they are always like this, you know, depression, but obvious depression, but with a slanted slope at the end. It's not really the wall, you know. And we always find post holes here at on the perimeter, not inside of the house, but around the house. We always find the post holes in the earliest Jomon period. So it's obvious that it's a little bit developed form of the tent, you see? And probably that was further developed into the pit dwelling of larger size and a solid big pit. Yeah. So it's quite possible that they transformed their tent system into the pit dwelling just by gaining their interior space. And so probably that's the beginning of the pit dwelling system. And they have pit dwellings in other parts of the world. And probably the stories were always the same. It's really simple story, right? So wherever you were, what kind of race you belong to, doesn't matter. They always wanted to complain about the narrow space, and they tried to expand the space like this, maybe. Okay, that's one theory that I could explain. Well, it's not been said so. It's only me who's saying it. We have no direct evidence for this development, but I think it's right. And also, drainage systems. And I think I forgot to explain about this drainage. Some of the, no, I've shown you the picture of the pit dwellings from various periods, Jomon, Yayoi, and Kofun period. And only in the Kofun period example, you've seen the ditch along the wall dug up, and that was a drainage ditch. But you can't see those drainage ditches in Jomon period too, actually. Not always, but in many cases, you see the drainage ditch, not that big and deep, but little ditch like this, dug in around the wall, you know. So it's the same system, drainage system. And at the same time, you see, when they dig the pit of the pit dwelling, you know, this part of the soil, earth, has to be removed, right? Have to be carried out. And where do they go? If you're making many pit dwellings, you have to have piles of the waste dirt, right? But they always pile them up right here, outside of the pit, and to form a bank. 包みのようなね、bank ですね。That goes around the pit. So in this way, you would be able to avoid the rainwater to come into the pit with a bank. The rainwater stops. However hard the rain falls, actually the roof should cover the bank, of course. Bank will be destroyed by rainfall, so it has to be bigger than tent. Okay. So, and it has a bank right here. So however hard the rainfall was, you know, the water doesn't go into the pit. And even if they did a little bit, you have a drainage system right here. So you will always have the dry floor. you see. And I forgot to mention about this one. Also, we have seen this circular settlement. Well, let me show you the picture again. Let's see. Oh. Circular settlement. No. The reason why they made it circle, they made the alignment of stone, houses in circle, which is very hard to tell. You know, we don't really know the reason why. But as we also see, we have seen this one, you see, the construction zones of the settlement. And in circular settlements, circular villages, you always have this open space, or either sometimes you have graveyards, cemetery, grave space at the center. But still, at this central area, you don't have much things. It's kind of vacant compared to the other area. You're not supposed to make anything right here at the center in the circular settlement. So it's a plaza area, hiroba と言いますね, plaza area ですね. And probably that was a space, common space that they all come together and do meeting with ceremony, ritual, whatever, or festival, whatever, singing, dancing, maybe, you know, that's a community space. And so this is the center of their activity and center of their community construction. And as they line up in circle like this and live in the circle, they are all same distance from the center, you see? Wherever you live, they're all same distance from the center. And that really represents the equality, maybe, equality of their situation in this community. Everybody's the same, everybody's equal, you know, nobody's ahead of you, you know. And probably that's why they like to form this kind of a circular villages. And probably the same reason they had in the Paleolithic time, early Paleolithic time, they had this huge circular sites. Probably the tents were around the circular zone and open space at the center. It's pretty much the same system as you see here. So you see, they are equal in social, well, not system, but social status, isn't it? They're all equal, so they could line up in circle, and at the same time, you could see everybody. If you are in circle, you can see everybody from your house, right? And nobody's hiding from anywhere. You know, everybody's exposed, everybody is linked together, and everybody's equal. I think that's what it meant to be in circle, live in circle. All right. And also, and this one. You see, I've explained about this large settlement, that's headquarter settlement, we would call, and other smaller settlements, villages all around. And they would form a big community as one. And it doesn't mean that this headquarter settlements has more power and control over the other smaller settlements. It doesn't mean that. And it's just that headquarter, it's just the center where everybody would be gathering around whenever that was, maybe when they need to do something big, when they were building something big. I'll talk about that later, but you need more hands and everybody will come together to this headquarter settlement and work together. Or I should mention about this trade system. I talked about the trade of the obsidian and other local goods, but they could put up something like market, of course, in this community, and everybody would bring something to this headquarter settlement in certain time cycle, like every week or every 10 days, I don't know, every month, I don't know, but they must have had the kind of system that they could come together and trade things. Well, they could do that every time, always with neighbor settlements, of course, all the time. But in certain time, they would come together to one place, big settlement, and do the big market. And in later historic time, early historic time, it was quite clear that they've done that. And it's quite interesting that they didn't have this headquarters settlement in, for example, Nara period, Heian period, Kamakura period. They didn't have a huge settlement to come together, but instead they chose a particular spot outside the villages, the spot that doesn't belong to any villages or anybody. And they thought that belonged to the nature, very important spots with huge tree or something like that, that belongs to the nature, not to the person. And they chose that spot and they come together every month or something and do the trade. And that really happened in the historic time. And probably this was kind of the origin of that practice, I believe. Well, we don't know. This is also in the imagination, of course, but I think it's pretty right, telling from the material evidences like dispersal of jade, obsidian, and other material all over. Well, it could not be done just by simple, trade with neighbor villages. They must have had this big system, especially in the latter half of the Jomon period. Not so much in the former half, the earlier time. They could not have developed such kind of system, social or community system. But from middle Jomon period on, they must have had this complicated system of community and communication and trade. So I'm pretty sure that they must have something like markets, in certain area. And that was a high time that they could all get together and exchange information, talking and laughing and eating and having feast maybe. And if that system was established at that time, probably somebody else from other community would visit, knowing that they would have this special day market on this day, and so they could do more trade with the other material from other part of the community. You see, so that kind of thing expanded and expanded along with the information, I guess. And also, when you talk about the network, you have to communicate, right? So you always have to worry about the language. What kind of language were they talking? We don't know. But did I mention about the development of language in the Paleolithic time? In the evolution of human beings, as soon as they evolved into Homo sapiens ですね、新人ですね。They have this new traits that there's called their mouth space. 口外っていうんですけどね、mouth space is bigger than the previous species. And the ceiling part of your mouth is high and wide. So you got more open, you got more space in your mouth. So that you can move your tongue freely to produce complicated sounds. You can choose various sounds, different sounds to distinguish the oral talking sound value. You see, so that means they could have developed the language, communication language, in Homo sapiens stage. And in social manner, I mean, in various activities like hunting or all kinds of activities, you need to have a communication device like a language. You could hire something like gesture, your hands and arms and your face expression would be able to express something, but to the limited extent. You cannot communicate, you cannot say something complicated, like your ideas and concepts, you know, or various systems, stone tool making, production system, or whatever. So they must have had this language, common language. And in Paleolithic time, they were wandering around. In the former half, they were going for a long, long distance, chasing animal, right? And they could meet with other group, of course, by chance. And they did have communication, I'm sure. You know, I'm sure they did not ignore each other and just pass by. You know, that's not the way. They had to exchange a lot of material information on people and everything. So that was a chance, their very good chance to meet with other group. So they must have had this common language at that time, even in the earlier stage. And since they were distance walkers, distance travelers, and as I mentioned, the stone tool types of that time is quite common all throughout the archipelago. So that means they had the same ideas, same kind of ideas, and the same kind of lifestyles, and same language to communicate with. And that's my assumption. And that was developed into Jomon time, of course. So they had already established a solid language, Jomon Go, Jomon language at the time. And probably that's the base of what we use today in Japan, Japanese, isn't it? Because in linguistics, and Japanese is a mysterious language of all languages in the world, because most of the languages can trace back, and you can see that you can know about the genealogy. その系列がね、わかるんですね。But except Japanese. Japanese has no similarity with other languages. like Chinese, Koreans, we have a little bit of common parts, but it's only a parts. And the basic languages, vocabulary, phonetic value, 音歌とかね、そういうものは、all different, all independent. And the linguistics are always perplexed when it comes to talk about Japanese, you know. And I firmly believe that that's because Japanese was isolated language, and Japanese was developed from the previous Japanese that was spoken in Yayoi period, Jomon period, and even Paleolithic period. You know, they must have changed a little bit. I mean, well, not all exactly the same language all through. They must have had this development and change and transition, but the basis of this Japanese was probably formed in the Paleolithic time. That's my assumption too. Nobody says that, but well, there's no other explanation you can make about Japanese, origin of Japanese. So anyway, that's one theory. Okay. And also, well, I'll mention about it later too, but how about the relationship with the area abroad, overseas, like continent? You know, the China area, Korean Peninsula, Siberia. Did they have, in Jomon time, did they have any communication with those? And that's possible because in Jomon period, they had this dugout canoe. They could cross the ocean if it's not too long. So the closest one is the south end of Korean Peninsula, which is very close to Kyushu, northern Kyushu area. And also Hokkaido, Northern Island, and Siberia is pretty close to we have no direct evidence, of course, but there are some evidences that might suggest that they had this communication. Maybe some people would come in and some people would go out from Japan, because there are some common traits of pottery between Southern Korea and Northern Kyushu in certain time. And also we have some stone artifacts I will show you later, stone artifacts that seems to be originated from China. And also some technology like lacquer, urushi desu ne, lacquer painting technology could have been introduced from China, because China, they have this long old tradition of lacquer painting. And but we don't know. Some people would say that, oh, nowadays they do the DNA study on plants and lacquer too. Lacquer resin sometimes include plants and well, not in the lacquer resin, but the lacquer plant itself, the Japanese lacquer tree, and they compared the DNA with the Chinese lacquer tree and concluded that they're different, totally different species and no connection. So obviously they did not bring the Chinese lacquer tree into Japan to plant it and grow it. But it doesn't mean that the technology was introduced from China. You know, the information about this technology could have been come in from China into Japan, carried by a people. And if this people, Chinese people, knew about this lacquer technology and came into Japan and saw the lacquer tree, which is different from Chinese lacquer tree. But he could do the same thing, you know, collect the resin and start processing. And so it's possible the technology of the lacquer painting could have been introduced from China, and so on and so forth. And there are some other evidences may show the instant, very short and small scale communication with abroad. But it's not like, you know, movement of the people, like, なんでしょうね。Like immigration, you know, the group of people, big group of people come into Japan or going out of Japan. Immigration or emigration, that's not the story. You know, if that happened, that must have had a lot of influence into German culture, even in a part, but a certain area. But we don't see that. We don't see a big influence, obvious influence from abroad. So it must have been very small scale, very instant. That some people just came in, that happened to come in or happened to come out, go out, something like that. So that's one thing I forgot to mention, the relationship with the overseas area. All right. Anything else? And I'm pretty much ahead of schedule. And including today, we have 3 more days. And we may finish it up by next week. So by any chance, if you have anything that you want to know more and you need more explanation about the previous content, please tell me so. You can write that in, you can tell me now, and you can write that in your comments or whatever, mail, send me mail, whatever. So I would do that, of course, anytime. And it should be related to, of course, related to your content of your report, to final report. I'm sure you have been working on it already. All right. Okay, any questions so far? It's okay. All right. So let's see. We got that. Oh, Beryl. Yeah, let's start from Beryl. Oh yeah, I was going to talk about the equality of the society as the final explanation of the network. People are still arguing. There's a controversy about the arguments about the existence of classification in German society. 階級ですね。階級性があったかどうか。Excuse me. And some insist that there must have been a certain classification, certain leaders with the power reign over the settlement community or bigger community too. And some would say no, it's totally equal. Of course, you must have had this leaders in every community. Every group should have a leader. And in most cases in the prehistoric culture all over the world, they have leaders. you know, human beings cannot live alone. So they always live in group, like a kinship group, and sometimes over the kinship and more bigger group, but they always have this leader. And in most of the cases, they are the elders, because the elders have the most knowledges and most experience, and you know, very positive, very he can decide, he or she can decide things, you know. So everybody rely on the elders. Until quite recently, you know, elders were treated good, and everybody pay respect to the elders, because they know things, they have experiences and everything, and they can teach you things, right? So most of the cases, the elders were the chiefs, the head and leader of the group. But it doesn't mean that he or she had the strong power to reign over and control, have a big control over the member of the community. No, it's not the case. And he or she is just a leader, you know. And when everybody would gather around and talk and discuss about things. If they have a problem, they would discuss, they would expose their own opinions. And finally, when discussion is almost over, then the conclusion will be given by the leader, right? So, and those leaders were elders. Well, sometimes it could happen that some strong guys, you know, masculine, strong guys, very good at hunting, you know, he could hunt so many animals and he could get more food, would have power and would be the leader of the group too. That could be the case, of course. But it doesn't mean that he has the strong power and he collects all the resources and dominate the food and other resources, obsidian and jade and things. We don't have that indication. I mean, we have no evidence of concentration of those wealth, concentration of food, concentration of material like jade and obsidian. We don't see that in any of the settlement sites of Jomon period. So he could be, well, in this case, it will be he with all the muscle, strong guy. But he is a leader. He may be the leader, but he's not in power too much. You know, the same story. In other case, there's other case that leader will be a shaman. 巫女さんみたいなね、シャーマンですね。まじないをする。Magical power. And so many cases, there were shaman in various community, in various races, because there got to be a doctor, there got to be somebody that knows well about the nature, knows about medicine maybe, you know, which grass to eat when you have a headache or something like that, you know. And those knowledgeable people with a magical power, sometimes with a magical power maybe. And, well, I would call it charisma, you know, very specific charm that attracts people. And he or she would be a shaman. In many cases, that's she, you know, women tend to be shaman. I don't know why. But... So she or he could be the leader too. And that was a case actually in the historical fact in Yayoi period. Towards the end of the Yayoi period, there was a very famous shaman called Himiko in Western Japan, and she prevailed. She ruled over a big community, big area, and to form almost a country. But we are not certain about Jomon time, of course. But we still believe that in some cases those shamans had to be the leaders or strong guy, but normally, mostly the elders were the leaders. And as I mentioned, in any cases, in German period, you don't see any evidence of the concentration of power, concentration of material, and that dominated by one single person, or dominated by certain small group of people like royalties. We don't see that at all in German period. So it's been said that the German community was pretty much equal. Everybody's equal, and that's quite natural thing too, because you can't be rich in natural resources. In terms of natural resources, you can collect chestnuts, but chestnuts are chestnuts. You can't collect tons of chestnuts and acorns, and you can't accumulate tons of wild boar meat or deer antler or anything. It's limited, so limited, and you can't, since you cannot accumulate those goods, then you can't have power. And that's sure economical thing. And in later time, like in historic period or before historic period, they gained power, and there was a strong leader in Yayoi and Kofun period, and they will be called kings. They were obviously accumulating all those material and food and everything, power and everything. They had a strong control over everybody and everything. So that was not the case in German time, because they were hunter and gatherers. They depended totally on the nature, natural environment, which would not give you too much things to accumulate, right? So, but still, until this Middle German period, the natural environment was so rich. It seems to be so rich compared to the other part of the world. Probably Japan is one of the most rich place in terms of nature and natural resources and natural diversity. So they didn't have to really worry about going into agriculture and change their lifestyle. They could keep their lifestyle so long. Of course, they had those strategies of expanding, exploiting the resources, so they could have so much choice and choice of the resources, and they wouldn't have to, so that they wouldn't have to worry about their food tomorrow or next year. You see, it's very small scale, and the economy scale was very small. And even though the environment was rich, they didn't have to fight over, and it's more profitable. It has more merit to live together in equality. Probably that's this social system and social concept of German people, German society. And we could lead the conclusion from all the evidences that we find from the German settlement sites. Okay. All right. And well, by the way, I'll tell you, probably even today, even the modern world today, so much environment was changed, so much development had taken place, and so much buildings we see and roads paved and everything, machines and smartphone and computer and network, everything. But Japan still keeps the position of the most rich place in terms of nature, I believe. I've never been to all kinds of countries and, overseas, all over the world. But whenever I go out and come back, and I land at the Narita airport and came into Tokyo area, I passed through the countryside of the Chiba prefecture, and I will always feel, I'm really astonished every time. I'm astonished by the beauty of this nature, all the trees, greens, fields, and rice paddy, and so clean and crisp, and so many types of trees you can see, bamboo bushes, and so I always think about this Jomon time. They must have had this very rich environment, not only the resources, botanical resources, fauna and flora, but geology and water, climate, everything's in harmony. Everything is very gentle. We have 4 seasons, clear 4 seasons, as well as Jomon time did. And but summer is not too hot. It's hot, but not too hot like desert or tropic area. The winter is cold, but it's not too cold as the other parts, you see? And springtime, autumn time is just beautiful. And we have good water source. You can drink directly from the river, even today, in most of the area, even in Tokyo area. Well, not downtown Tokyo, but if you're going up the mountain area, western Tokyo area, you can just drink the river water right there. And it's not mineral, too much mineral water. And enough rainfall, but not too much. Humidities, everything is very modest and in harmony and beautiful. And so much, the fauna and flora, animal, plants, insects, whatever, in so much in diversity. And you see, it's rich. I would choose just one word, and I would say rich. And well, it's by chance. Japan is the island archipelago and surrounded by the ocean water, and it's our climate is totally different from the ones from the continent. And like one time I had a archaeology meeting in the States, in California, middle part of California, like Santa Rosa. And I've been there, and I was walking around the town, and I realized that they had so much variety of trees in their gardens, and trees that's really familiar with me, because all the trees that I see in Japan too, and I was very surprised to see the botanical tendencies is pretty much alike Japan. And latitude wise, 北緯、緯度で言うとね、it's about the same area as Japan, so I could understand. But the climate is different. That is more like a continental climate and more dry. It's a lot drier than Japan. And once you step out of this green area, what you see is gray, brown dirt with sandy dirt. It's like, looks like a desert, and that's what I saw, and that's what I realized. It's different. Even the climate condition over the earth may be close, but it's totally different. Every element, like being an island surrounded by water, and water conditions and creature conditions. It's a balanced place, very much balanced place, and very easy place for human to live in. And that's my image. That's my impression of Japan compared to the other parts of the world. There are so many beautiful places in the world, of course, but it's different, totally different. And that gives you a good hint about the thrive of German culture. And I'll talk about that later too, okay? And now, let me see about this burial, about the dead people. And in many cases, you would reflect, this burial system would reflect the social concepts of human beings and community, and they would reflect those systems. And the spiritual world, of course, their beliefs about the life and death, of course. And there are a variety of burial system in German period. Mostly a pit burial, ですね。土工と言いますか、pit burial. And it's very limited coffin type. Stone slabs were formed into rectangle, and the body was buried inside or something like that. It's not very many in the southern part mostly. And this is also limited, but there's a pot burial. Pottery was used for burial. And sometimes you find the burial in the pit dwelling. The pit dwelling we are finding from the sites now is all of them are abandoned pit dwelling, of course, right? And as they abandoned the house, they also abandoned human beings, dead people inside the pit. And so they're found with all kinds of debris, like pottery fragments and stone tool fragments and stuff. So it looks as if they were abandoned, like trash or garbage. And also, there's the similar case in the shell mound. Shell mound is the site that shows accumulation of a shellfish shell, and obviously made along the coastal area of the ocean. And they also include a lot of debris, fragments of tools, broken tools and stuff, but they also include human beings too. Not always, just in some cases, they will find skeletal remains in shell mound or shell midden. And it's easy for, the skeletal remains, those bones, organic bones, were preserved pretty much well in the shell mound, because the shell includes a lot of calcium, and the calcium dilutes with the water. And as from the rainfall over the shell mound, the calcium was diluted and come out of the shell and cover the other things like debris or skeletal remain or whatever, bones and antlers, deer antlers, everything. So that kind of organic material in the shell mound are preserved pretty well. It's coated with the calcium, right? And so this is the same case with this abandoned house, the place that they dump the garbage, they dump the human beings too. And so that could reflect their thoughts about the dead. Once you're dead, you're nothing. You're just debris. You're garbage. But I should not think so. That's different. I don't think so. They're like your father, mother, grandpa, grandma. When they die, they would treat them as garbage. I don't think so. Jomon people is very close to us, and they would not do that. And the reason why probably is close to what I explained about the pottery abundance. I mean, they deposit, they throw away pottery in number, in quantity. I explained about that into the pit dwelling, you see. And it's not just dumping the garbage, but it's rebirth thoughts, possibly. And if that's the case with the human skeletal remains, human body, well, it's more understandable, right? And dead people should be born alive, born again, rebirth. So the abandoned house pit dwelling house pit, or shell mound, and those places are not the garbage place, but the place of rebirth. And that's probably why they buried human body in there too. They're praying for the rebirth of the dead, of their family or community member. Probably. Highly possible, I believe. And this case, this is a flex burial. You bend the legs, knee and hip are bent. It's kind of loose, but always bent. And that's what we call flex burial. And if you do not bend the legs and bury them straight, then you would call them extended burial. And we have both of them in Jomon cases, but very much of the flex burial, I think. And it makes a lot of difference, in labor, as you have to dig a hole, dig a pit for burial. Flex burial, you don't have to dig bigger. It's just like the trap pit for the deers, you're saving your labor energy by doing this flex burial. But we don't know. There must be other reasons for that too. And because sometimes you would have grave goods, and not very many though. Sometimes you have a big stone on your chest, looks as if, oh, you don't come back again, just give a load to your body or something, big stone on your chest. Or sometimes your head, your skull is covered with a pottery upside down. We don't really know about those, but there are certain practices that come along with the burial. And this picture represents very, very rare case. And you see various things. Like these are two female women. And one has this big jade pendant on her chest. And a bunch of bracelets, shell bracelets on her arm. And this lady too has bracelets here and here, both arms. And I think there's a baby, not baby, but a small kid right here. But this is a rare case. And we don't see this kind of burial goods, fuksohin, burial goods very often. So we don't know about those ladies, but it's quite possible that they were special people, like shaman, special people of certain special role in the society. So they always wore this pendant and bracelets. It doesn't mean that this lady had a strong power and ruled over everybody, because we don't find them very much. And this is a pot burial. This is a regular sized pot, like a 40 centimeter, 30 to 40 centimeter high. So it's small. So the adult body would not go in there, of course. And what happened is the, なんていうんだっけね、secondary burial って言うんですね。So you leave the body, when somebody's dead, you leave the body exposed and or buried in the earth, shallow, not too deep. So that, and leave it for a certain time, and all the flesh will go, and only bones would remain. Then they would dig them up and clean them, wash them and clean them, and rebury it into this pot. You see, that's one thing. Another possibility is that some of these pot burial would include baby bones, when they die right after the birth, and they would be put in this pot and buried. And those burial pots are always upside down. This is the rim, and this is the base. And mostly they have this opening at the base. This entire base was taken out, broken. Sometimes you have a tiny hole at the center, but always have a perforation, and in that way we can define those pots were probably burial pots. Probably they have this thought of a spirit or something, like animism, spirit that comes out and into your body. And if anything like bones, reburied bones inside still bears some kind of spirits, and they were afraid of it, probably. So in order for the spirits to go out of the pottery, they always made open end at the top, so they would go out from the body, probably. We don't know. This is a Shinshu kind of pottery. And this is close to what we have in Yuasa Museum upstairs. Those cake decoration type, those clay bands, fine clay bands attached type. These are strings of clay attached. Very delicate designs. We have that complete one in the upstairs of the Yuasa Museum. This is another type of secondary burial. It's not pot. You don't use pot, not directly the bones. And obviously it's being rearranged, after being rotted and bones washed and cleaned, then rearranged into a square form. I don't know why. It's kind of a rare case, but sometimes we find something like this. That this is obviously a secondary burial. And let's see. Oh, I forgot to mention this. As we saw in other picture like this, the burial area, the cemetery area, is within the settlement. This is center of the settlement. In another case, it's not exactly the center, but next to the center is the burial area. Always in the center, surrounded by the living people in their houses right here, right? So this is one characteristics of German burial. They are always within their settlement, and their dead ancestors are always with them, living people, in one place. So very close to yourself. They bury the dead very close to yourself. And you could see that in various races, you know, other part of the world, like in Taiwan too, in the mountain races like Yami group and others. Some of them would bury their parents under your bed in your house, you know, it's right under your bed. It's kind of spooky, but you know, so they are very close to the dead people. They like to be, you know, they want to keep the dead ancestors close to yourself. And that's Jomon culture. And that's quite different from other cultures in the later time. I will explain that later too. Okay, that's I have to mention. So death, the concept of death was not that you would not dislike, you would not avoid. All right. And some cases, it's a time. So let's have a break. It's 4:22. So let's have a 10 minutes break, okay? Any questions so far? All right, okay, let's have a break. All right, now, let's continue about the sparrow. And just a minute. And some of those skeletal remains, especially the skull, would bear something like this in their teeth. This is called teeth modification. And or teeth extraction too. You see the front teeth, upper front teeth were filed, you know, looks make you sick maybe. No, it's a file with so much pain, I guess, but it's filed like to make a saw-like teeth. And also these lower four teeth and those fang teeth, you know, these were intentionally extracted. 抜かれてるんですね。And this kind of teeth modification can be observed in certain period and certain area. And they have patterns. They have patterns of extraction and modification like this. You know, they call it R type, 4I type, 2C type, or something like that. And there are certain, the picture we've just seen is 4I type, you know, lower 4 teeth and 2 upper teeth. And it depends on the community. The pattern depends on the community. And it was not done so much in the middle and late Jomon period, you know, just modest type of extraction, just 1 or 2. It becomes more and more wild and latest Banki desu ne, Jomon period. And it depends on the community. The pattern depends on the community. And sometimes, like the dualism settlement that I showed you last week, you would find different patterns in both group. I mean, see. So this side would show certain pattern. This side, other side would show different pattern, something like that. So obviously, the teeth modification and extraction patterns differ, depends on the community. And sometimes it happens that different patterns just comes into this community, and you would find one or two of those, maybe only one different type within this group, and maybe one or two within this group. That's obviously came from the other community outside of this one, you know. And tracing this pattern, and you would be able to imagine how the marriage system took place, you know. Maybe if you are finding just one different pattern in this group, then, and if it's a female, maybe this girl came from other settlements, other community, to be in a part of this community, you know. And that kind, well, I'm making it simple, but this kind of analysis has been done, and clarifying those marriage relationship between different communities. It's very interesting. It's quite popular in the western part of Japan too. Not so much in the eastern part, but anyway. And the reason why they extract or do this modification, we don't really know. But someone would say that it's a passing ceremony, a type of passing ceremony. Tsukagire desu ne, like seijinshiki. When you become adult, you have to bear the pain. You know? Well, that happens. And you have some ethnological data, cultural anthropological data from some parts in the East Asia that they were doing that until quite recently. Maybe if you're older than 10 or 15 years old, you have to be extracted, your teeth. And you know, girls would cry out, you know. But you have to pass that ceremony to be admitted as an adult in that community. And well, that's kind of ceremony and social system that you have to go through. Even today, you go to this seijinshiki, right? And that's a remnant of this kind of tradition, isn't it? And you have a certain points that you have to pass in your life, from kids to adult, when you get married. And well, it starts from when you were born, you know, birth, and adult, marriage, and until you die, you know, final funeral. You have to pass several ceremonies, you know, even today. So there must have a lot of other type of ceremonies and rituals in that time too. Okay. And let's see. About the ceremony and rituals we have to step into, which is very, very difficult to reconstruct. And so many rituals has to be done. And we don't really know the origin of the rituals or ritual ceremonies. And that's the type of thing you have to do. You have to attend in your community. Well, there's so much many types of ceremonies that you can think of, and in various manner, various time, various methods, various attendants, you know, only man, only women, you know. And probably that all started from this assuring of a common concept. You know, sharing the concept in that community is very important. If you say everybody's free, everybody's independent, and everybody should be free and do anything they like. You cannot keep the community, right? You know, it's be all distorted, and can't be live in one system. But still, everybody is different and everybody is free, basically. So you tend to do free things, and community is always threatened to be apart. So sometimes you have to have this chance of reuniting the community. And probably that was the basic object, basic goal of those ritual services. And it could be related to anything, like natural environment, related to birth and death, life and death, and passing, as I mentioned right now, and disease, illness, anything related to those things that happens, that passes in your life. And every time you gather around, or the community member gather around and go through a certain process of ritual, and then you would, or the community members would share the same common concept about nature, about death, about whatever there is. And so you would be united as one community. I've talked about the community pride and identity through this pottery designs, but in order to hold that kind of pride and identity, you would have to always share the same concept among the community members. And it's not very easy, so we tend to just do things we like. So gradually we are going apart each other. So sometimes you have to bundle it, intentionally through this kind of ritual services and ceremonies. Probably that's it. And of course, you could have other purposes too, And and of course, another thing is that, as I mentioned in the very beginning of this class, we are all born from parents. We are given our lives from parents, and parents were given their lives from grandparents, and so on. And so it's obvious, everybody knows as a fact that your ancestors are very important, related directly to your being, your existence. Should be proved by your ancestors, responsible, And so it is quite natural that, especially in the early prehistoric times and early cultures, they always worship their ancestors. Worship ancestry is a pretty common practice in those communities. And of course, yes, and not only ancestors, but the elders, living elders, were paid respects, being treated good. And which is not the tradition now. We're losing that tradition. It's kind of strange. It's kind of sad too, but elders are really isolated now, and that's not really good. Anyway, that was the case in early time. So those ceremonies and rituals are also related to this ancestral worship, and also the nature worship, including the animism, were also the other major thing in that time, I guess. So many things you have to concern. So many things you can't understand. even today, we don't understand about our lives. What's life? What's death? You know, you cannot define it. But, so as the early people, and so many things they could not understand in the natural environment, and they have to give explanations. That's the intelligence of the human beings who has a curiosity. You want to explain, you want to understand things, though you cannot. Well, you make up stories then, you know, your own stories. Fact or not, doesn't matter. You tend to make up stories. And that story was heavily related to this kind of ceremony and ritual, and you know, something to do with their concepts, of course. And some ritual could include something like this: house burning. And as we excavate Jomon pit dwellings, some of them are obviously burnt down. You'll see a lot of charred posts, beams, and sometimes a remnant of a charred roof, grass roof, if you're lucky. And many cases you will find those burnt evidences. And archaeologists are wondering if they were accidental fire or not. And some people would insist that they were intentionally burnt. So they are doing this experiment. They built one pit dwelling, reconstruct it, and burn it intentionally. And what happens after that, you know, they would, so that they could compare the remain of what they've done here and to what you have found from the sites, you know, how the distribution of charcoal and, you know, things like that. And as a result, they saying now that probably some of those houses were intentionally fired, intentionally burned. And we wouldn't be able to explain why. But one explanation could be something like infection, just like coronavirus. You know, there must have been a lot of infection that attacked those communities at the time too, starting from influenza, flu. You know, at the time, flu is really a strong disease. I mean, you could die from it, and it was very tragic disease. And if one family got infected and died altogether, then they would burn their body altogether with the house, you know, burn everything to kill away the virus. I don't know if they had the concept of virus at the time, but probably something like that, you know. Those family was caught by something bad, you know, and they would have to burn them to cease and stop the infection. And that's one possibility. And other possibility is that someone would say that this burning of the house is a part of the rebirth ceremony that I just explained. Rebirth. 再生ですね. You burn the house, and anything inside burned with the house would be born again, you know, so given birth by burning. That's one possibility too. But not all of the pit dwellings excavated show indication of fire at all. Well, it's not too many, you know. Normally you don't find those charcoals. I mean, charred posts and wood and stuff. So it's only limited to some cases. And if it's related to the rebirth, then you would have to have more of it, I think. Well, we don't know. And there are many thoughts and ideas, opinion about those. And we're still looking for the reasons. And talking about the concept of the world, this is one theory stated by this professor of Kokugakuin University, Kobayashi Tatsuo. He's a Jomon guy, one of the most famous Jomon archaeologists. And he made this contra concept. You know, if you have a house right here, this is your pit dwelling, and inside is called uchi. Uchigawa desu ne, inside, uchi. And contrary to the inside, you have outside, soto desu ne, uchi and soto. So counter concept. And the soto will be the village, counter to house. House is inside, village is outside. And if you regard the village as uchi, inside, if you're a community member, village member, this village is inside your community. Then outside will be soto, right here, will be field, hara desu ne, mura and hara. And if you regard your adjacent field, hara, as your inside area, then you would find some outside, way over, beyond the mountain range. You know, yama desu ne, and soto desu ne. And something like that. They could have this kind of counter concepts about the world. We don't know. It's just one idea. And there should be a border, sakai desu ne, right here, along the mountain chains. Maybe mountain chains, ridges could be the border of two different big areas. And that could be the border of the culture too, especially when you talk about the pottery designs, pottery typologies, and those borders will be the border of the pottery designs too. Anyway, this is just one concept, worldview. Okay, let's talk about these features, very specific features, which seems not be related to your daily life. It's apart from your life, daily life. But they made a lot of strange things. And this is one of those called stone circle. You form a circle formation with the stones, accumulation of stones. You collect stones in circle pattern. Here's another circle pattern again. You see, they like circles, you know. And here's another one nearby, two circles close to each other. It's in Akita Prefecture, northern Japan, Japan seaside. Oyu というところですね。Oyu Kanjo 列石と言いますね。And this is a collection of stones right here, band of stones. And here, it's very strange things is made, which is like this. One big stone erected and 4 round stones in 4 corners. And something like stones, like long stones, like French bread, you know, radiating position like this. And we don't know what this is. It's a big mystery. We don't really know what this is. Somebody used to call it sundial, but there's no sense that it's been the sundial clock. Sundial is supposed to have only one side facility in the shallow part, right? Anyway, and also you have the same thing in other cluster right here, right there. You see, this is one stone sticking up, and here's one. And in the same, almost same position in each stone circle. And we were wondering what these are, and they excavated the area around, and they didn't find anything except some bones remain, remnants of bones. So probably something related to burial, they would say. But it's not really burial. If it was a burial, you have to have, you know, a series of burial pits around, but you don't find that much of burial here. So we don't really know the function of this feature. But you naturally, you can imagine that it's a lot of work to make one of these, right? You have to carry all those heavy stones and hundreds of heavy stones from the riverbed and form this kind of features. And you have to spend a lot of time and energy. So you have to have certain reason, important reasons to make this and use this for something. And this is a plan drawing of two a stone circle. It's more apart, but on one page it's close. But the excuse me, it's a drawing in the same alignment, and you see the sundial, the stone sticking up, so right here and right there. And if you tie it with the connect it with the line, you know, it's on this line. And this line is exactly the sunset direction of summer solstice. See, 夏至ですね, summer solstice. And we don't think this is a coincidence, you know, it's exactly the same direction. Center and sundial, center and sundial, and it's alignment, exact alignment. And probably so that we could say probably this feature were related to certain kind of ceremonies that has much to do with the season, you know. And seasonality is very, very important concept in Jomon time, as you have already learned. They have 4 seasons, clear seasons, and they have their natural resources that change by season. And so they needed something like calendar, although they did not have calendar like we do today. And the only calendar they had, I think I explained about this before, but is the sun, moon, and stars. Now, so this may be related to astronomical concept, and they could have done very big ceremony on the day of summer solstice, and when the sun sinks on the summer solstice day in June, and close to the end of the June. And probably this was the facility, this was the apparatus to measure that day, you know. So guys watching from this side, and when the sun sinks straight down through those features, then they would know the season, the very point, specific point of the season. And they could perform some kind of ceremonies down there. And these are apart from the settlement, and but the such a time-consuming, energy-consuming facility was made just for that purpose. You know how important it was, you could tell. And it's not the only case. There are so many other cases like that. And this is Yamanashi Prefecture next to Tokyo, but in the mountain area. There's a site called Kinsei. Kinsei, the name Kinsei is used to be called Konsei, gold spirit, isn't it? And in character-wise, it's written gold, golden spirit. But konsei originally means man's organ, man's energy, sexual energy, konsei. And we don't really know the origin of that name, but you see here, this is a phallic symbol made of stone, and all the others, not in shape, but all the other erecting stones you can see, and they're all surrounded by the stones. This is another stone circle right here. It's not as neat as the other one, but they're forming units, circle and symbol, circle and symbol, and they're all in alignment too. It's the lower part, one step higher, one step higher. And it's really a marvelous sight, it's really astonishing. And they have no stone resources right here in this area. You have to bring them down from river, which is a little bit far from here. So again, they're spending so much time and energy just to form this kind of features. And obviously they were designed for some kind of ceremony or ritual or whatever, probably related to the sexual purposes, isn't it? Maybe fertility, not necessarily the human fertility, but the animal or plants or whatever. So they probably had a big ceremony with all the settlements around. All the people got together here maybe once a year, twice a year, I don't know, but they had this big ritual ceremony related to this fertility, and these are fertility symbols, probably. And we don't find this kind of huge features, huge facility in Jomon time sometimes. And they have various types of features. Some features were made of stones like this. Some features were made of earth only, like a bank, huge round bank were formed in northern Japan too. And there's a news, by the way, there's a news that came out yesterday that Hokkaido, Northern Island, and Tohoku, Northern Jomon site groups, 17 of them were appointed as the world's treasure, world's heritage, I should say, world's heritage by UNESCO, ICOMOS. And that's a great thing. They now the world is admitting the value of Jomon culture now. But anyway, those big mound-like or bank-like features are also included in those too. And probably these sites will be included in the future, I guess. Okay, another thing is instead of stone, wood circle. And this is the Toyama Prefecture, Japan seaside, the central part of Japan. And this site called Chikamori, they found huge wood stood upright. Not these are reconstruction, but of course the upper part over the surface was all lost, gone. But the underground, the base of those posts or wood were remaining, and they are huge. Like they're made of chestnut tree that grew like over 1 meter diameter. It's huge ones, And those huge chestnut tree were cut down and dragged down from the mountain and split in half. And that's amazing work for stone to culture people. but they split that in half and they erected it. And we don't know the height of this wooden pole, chestnut pole. So they just made it this height. They don't know, we don't know. Could be higher. And oops, this is a different one. And these were aligned in circle. And this one is a little bit different. This one has a curb cross section. These are half split wood, half split log. And this one has a curb this way and this way. So it seems like it has an entrance right here, like a doorway, entranceway. So obviously they have a specific space right here and a circle. It's really interesting. And not only to mention about this technology of woodworking, you know, lumbering, cutting down the huge tree and drag them down. Actually, at the base, at the very end of the wood, they have perforations. They have square holes, maybe 3 or 4 holes with a notch. So obviously they tied a huge rope, fat rope, to drag and move, transport them to this place. And so it's amazing sight, but we don't know the function of it. And here's another example of the Sanmai Maruyama, the center of the northern Jomon culture. And this is the headquarters of the headquarters, the largest settlement ever found in Japan in Jomon period. And this one also included in the World's Heritage appointments. Of course, this is the center. And it seems to me, telling from the pottery, this settlement lasted over 1,000 years. It's a long, long time. How much generations, we can't tell. And they've made so much study about this site and so much material were found. And it's like a department store. I mean, you find various type of artifacts all over Japan in Jomon sites. And it differs. The content of the artifacts differs, depends on the sites, depends on the area. You know, certain area may have a lot of jade, certain area would have obsidian, the other area would have axe and, you know, things like that. But everything from all over Japan got together in this site. You can find everything here. So we call them department store, you know. And it's pretty obvious now. You can tell that it was the center, real center of the Jomon culture in the at least the northern part of Japan, and everything would be collected right here by trade. Everybody would bring everything to this place and did the big, huge trade. And you don't see any accumulation of those material here. But you know, it's a wide, vast area. They used to they tried to make a baseball field here. The Aomori city was planning about the baseball place and started to dig the ground and found all sorts of material. And finally, they gave up making baseball field. And this site was so vastly investigated because it was a baseball field, designed for baseball field, and found so many things, and so many analysis done, and it's very interesting. And also the pollen analysis of this area proved that they actually formed intentional chestnut forest, you know, from the time they have lived here, that they have started to live here, they have established the settlement here. The pollen of the chestnuts increased like crazy, you know. So it's obvious that they did it intentionally. Anyway, and within that territory, they had the same story. The over 1 meter diameter, huge chestnut tree wood were buried. I mean, placed here, 6 of them, and only the base was remaining underground. It's kind of moist environment, so it has more water underground. And this time they measured the hardness of the soil, hardness of the earth right below the remnant of the pole wood. And they calculated from the hardness of the soil the weight of the pole. And this is the reconstruction. And the soil was so hard, that means they had so much load on it. And they, according to their calculation, this is over 20-meter log was placed in Jomon time. And there are something like floors, 3 stories floors, but we have no evidence about that. What we only know is the poles, 6 poles stood here. Nothing to indicate about those floors, because some of the archaeologists just without evidence insisted that this must be a watchtower or something like that. So they had to make floors, but I don't think so. I don't think they had nothing like that. Only posts standing, 6 of them. And it looks really weird, but here's another picture. This is a winter solstice instead of summer, but the sunset can be seen, observed right through those 2 rows of 3 poles, 6 in total, 3 poles and 3 poles in a pretty straight rectangular formation. And you can see the winter sunset right in between going down. You see? So this is a system that they had, maybe they may take various form with the stones or wood or whatever, but they always had this system. And so we can estimate that this kind of ceremonial things, this kind of ritual or ceremonial things related to seasons are so important for Jomon people who lived with nature, you see. And we don't really know about the solstice. The solstice is a border of a big seasonal change, you see. And oops, not this one. It's the same story in other part of the world. Like you have this kind of facilities a lot all over. Like the famous ones are Stonehenge in England. It has also the system to define this winter solstice. Was it summer? No, summer solstice, I think. You see, that's the case in many other cultures too. So the seasonal ceremony was so important to the prehistoric people. And like, for example, Christmas, that's a ceremonial time for Christian people. And Christmas is 25th of the December, right? But some would insist that this was not the original form of ceremony. And that was passed down from the earlier settlers in Europe, like Celts. You know about the Celts, Keltojin, who had this big ceremony, the biggest ceremony of the year at the winter solstice, probably 21st of December or something, no? And the reason why they have this big ceremony in that winter time is that the winter solstice day is for them the day that winter dies. You got that? Winter dies. 冬が死ぬ日ね。Because from the next day, 22nd, from the 22nd of December, you're heading for spring, next spring, right? So 21st is the day the winter died and spring revives and summer comes back. So they celebrate the death of the winter. And that's why they had this winter solstice big ceremony. And that was passed down to Christianity. And the birthday of Christ was combined with it. And that's what they say in Europe, you know, for archaeologists. It's not just a Christianity ceremony. And anyway, so that's one of the concepts that it's quite understandable when we talk about the prehistoric culture. And the same sort of things could happen in Japan too. Especially the German people were pretty much concerned with the seasonal change. All right. So you don't have to have these floors. You don't need those. You only have to have 6 huge poles. And we call them monuments. And also there are another examples of megalith. Megalith っていうのは巨石ですね。Huge stones alignment like Karnak in France. And this alignment is so huge. Each stone would be, well, like 2-3 meters high. Huge stones, and hundreds of those aligned in alignment would show some directions, you know. And so all over the world in prehistoric time, you know, when they were hunter and gatherers, and, you know, they would not have so much time and energy for the kind of purpose, but they did, you know. That would reflect their spiritual world, of course. And so we call them monuments, 記念物って言いますね. But it's not to memorize. It was not made to memorize something, or, you know, it has a function, actual useful function, actually. And also, one thing very interesting about this Sannai Maruyama posts is that the measurements, you know, between those 2 poles are precisely measured, and 6 of them are erecting in rectangular formation, but each of them apart in same distance. And they must have measured it. And the measurements is a multiple of 35 centimeter. It's like 1.7 meter apart or something like that. And it's not only the case in this site. You can see exactly the same measurements in other sites all over, especially on the specific features like big pit dwellings. You see, I've shown you the oval shape, large pit dwellings. And their post holes were aligned in same distance based on 35 centimeter unit. Always. Not the regular pit dwellings. I told you the regular pit dwellings have no rules, no measurements, no rules in number of posts or anything. You know, it was totally free. You know, it's kind of weird, but only for those huge monumental things, houses or posts or whatever. they follow this scale, the measurements. And we call them Jomon measurements. Jomon shaku と言いますね。35 centimeter was the base. And they shared it in Jomon culture. And why? What do you think the reason for that? Why would they have so free people for their own houses, but they have to follow this exact measurements for this kind of stuff? Why is that? Anybody has idea? No? Well, you can't make these kind of things all by yourself. You have to collect so many people, hundreds of people, just by, you have to cut down the tree in the mountain, drag them down in distance to your settlement, and work on it and erect it. You have to dig a big pit, and you have to erect it with the power of 100 hundreds of people, and 6 of them. It's a time-consuming, energy-consuming work by a number of people. You see, and so many people working together. And if you don't have the standard of the measurements, then you would not have this kind of precise facility, right? So every time when they get together and do the big work, you have to follow this rule. You have to follow this measurements, Jomon shaku, Jomon scale. And probably that was a rule. And same story with those large pit dwellings too. And the problem is why they had to do this. Well, I mean, you can measure the direction of the sunset and everything, but you don't have to make it so big. You don't have to spend so much time and energy for that. Well, you could make it easier, right? The same system. And you don't have to carry all those huge stones all the way, spending months and, Why is that? They did it. And this is probably related to what I explained about the ceremony and ritual today. And the same concept lies underneath, I think. And you would intentionally collect people and do this kind of heavy work all together. And they would all work for one purpose, right? So their minds and bodies are all united towards one direction. The goal is set, So that means you can bundle them together through this kind of work. And so it's one of the device of sustaining their communities, their society. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes you would collect people and do this kind of work, heavy work. Then they would work together. It's one of the purpose of the ceremonies, festivals too. Well, think about us even today, like ICU festival. We haven't had that for a year, but like high school, university, whatever, or your local town festival. Everybody living on their own normally every day. But for that certain time of the year, for that certain purposes, they all get together and do the same thing, the same work to accomplish one goal. So their mind and their heart, body, they all get together and bundled into one big community, right? So probably that was the major purpose of this kind of festival or ceremony or big work. They had to do it in order to sustain their society occasionally. And probably that's it. And that was so important for them. And for that, they would have how do I say this? But they would have an easier life if they have this strong concept of belonging, to the community or big group. Because this kind of features did not appear until latter part of the Jomon period. In the former part, there was some, but not very many. And most of these, like Sannai Maruyama, were started in the latter half of middle Jomon period and into late Jomon period. And so that means they had so much difficulties in the latter half of the time because of the decline of the temperature, decline of the natural environment. And they were starting to risk their lives. They were in pinch, they were in emergency status. Then that means they had this big strain, spiritual strain. なんていうんだっけ、stress ですね。So much stress on your spirit. And everybody has those worry about their future. And everybody was suffering from the strain and stress. And this kind of work, big work, would release that kind of strain. It becomes some kind of a catalysis, doesn't it? It gives a catalysis to the spiritual strain and gives you more belief, give you more security through this concept of belonging to the community. They are all together. They are comrades, sidekicks, they're nakamada っていうことでね。So probably that's why they started to do this kind of thing. And let's see. And also there are other ceremonies could have been related to animal, because we are finding a lot of figurines, clay-made figurines like this. This is a wild boar with code marking and erasing technique. It's pretty real. This one's pretty real. And seal, probably, seemingly a seal, like the fins. It has 2 legs. I don't know, maybe a fin. And with a lot of Jomon decorations and lacquer pigments, red pigments are still remaining in pot. And this one was found in Hokkaido, Northern Island, where they had this marine mammals, kaisei honyuri ですね, seals and that kind of animal were in the water, and they were one of their games. And well, not this one. And so much wild boar figurines we can find, like the one I showed you at the beginning, and a variety of those, but there are always wild boars. Very few examples of others, like seal, maybe 1 or 2, but boars, wild boars, over a dozen have been found, maybe more. But except the deers, we have not found any figurine of deers. It's very peculiar. So obviously they were much more concerned about the wild boar compared to the deers. although they caught deers too, ate deers and used their antlers too, but boars were very important. We don't really know why. There are so many explanations, but we don't know. And wild boars are more effective because they bear many babies compared to deers, at one time. And they could be better resources of the animal protein, but we don't know. But anyway, they must have had certain concepts about those animals that they used. So they could have been various ceremonies and rituals related to their animal and the environment. And and also these were found towards the latter half of the German period. And probably the decline of environment, the decline of food resources, including plant and animal too. So the value of the animal and other food resources were rising up pretty much towards that time period. So they naturally had to do something, some kind of ritual, some kind of praying over the Mother Nature, I guess. So that could be the reason why they started to make these kind of things too. All right. And then also things related is the secondary tools. And I think I mentioned about this before, but the primary tool is the daily tools that you use for maintenance of your life, like pottery, cooking pottery, and arrowheads, hunting arrowheads, and scrapers and axes to cut the tree down and things like that. But there are a group of tools which seems obviously apart from the daily life. You cannot use them for daily life. So many types of things they made in German period as secondary tools. Like I mentioned, I wrote that down, like clay material, including figurines, stone material, and body ornaments, and probably tattooing too. Musical instruments, some of them. So I'll explain about these. Right. Jades, beautiful. These are some of the arrowheads were included, but those beads, perforated beads and pendants were, the jades were from one source of the Niigata prefecture, as you already know. And this is kind of exceptional case because all of this was found from one site. I said there was no accumulation of this kind of wealth or important material, but this is an exception. And probably this belongs to just one necklace, beads and pendants all together in one string. And probably this was owned by one person, a leader or shaman or whoever of that settlement. This is a rare case. You don't find this much of jade ornaments from one site. And you see all kinds of stuff, it depends on the original shape of the original stone material. But some things are long and some things, oh, this is incredible. These guys has a perforation in horizontal direction, not like this. Because making a hole opening hole into jade is so much work. Jade is one of the hardest mineral next to diamond. So even if you use the metal tools, you have to spend hours and hours just to make one hole. You don't have metal. And these holes, if you look into the hole, these holes are perfectly round. And that means it was perforated by a tool, rotating tool ですね。回転させる道具で開けた rotating tool, like owl or perforator. And what would be the tool material? And they've made a lot of experiments now and found out that they were made, the tools were bamboo sticks. Only bamboos would work like this. Did I tell you about this before? I forgot. That one of the reasons why they found this out is that actually close to the source of the jade, there is one site that obviously was a production site, for atelier site of the jade material. They got a bunch of jade material, original stones, fragments, and they got this whetstone, toishi ですね, and they got this, some of the jades would have a hole like this, but it's not perforated all the way through. It stops right in the between. And the cross section would be something like something like this. This is cross section of this hole. It's not all the way through. And it has a center part sticking out remaining. And that means it was made with a tubular tool, like a straw, that went into here and here, rotating, So we can't think anything else than bamboo sticks. And that must be hard material to some extent, very hard material, and still has a pipe formation. That's bamboo sticks, obviously. So, and they did make a lot of experiments. They actually made holes with bamboo sticks, and they could, if you spend hours and days and weeks, you could perforate this hard stone, right? And as you already know, this kind of material, jade ornaments, perforated jade ornaments, or pendants, beads, whatever, were liked by entire Jomo people and spread all over, all the way to Hokkaido, to the south, to Okinawa, all crossing the ocean by dugout canoe, and into Hachijo Island, south of Tokyo. So way out across the Black Current, Kuroshio, Japan Current. That's one of the heaviest current, very fast and strong current. And even today, if you go by boat across the current to Hachijo Island, they always start out from Tokyo Bay at night, like 11 o'clock at night, and you go across the current through the night, and you can't sleep because the most latest ship would, shake you around, and because of this strong current. Yeah, it's heavy thing, and I don't really see how they could just went across the strong and fast current just by the dugout canoe, the Jomo people. but they did. And we found those jade ornaments from Hachijo Island site. And so anyway, well, we talked about the trade. So it's the evidence, it's the fact that they really loved these ornaments. And I forgot to explain, but so what's the secondary tool? What's the meaning of secondary tool? Why they made this kind of things that you can't use actually? You know, it's no use, useless things actually. But they had to make it. They loved it. And of course, many of these bear symbols, symbolic things, isn't it? And so they may have certain ideas, and that idea could take form into something like this, you know, using various material. And one of the characteristics of these secondary tools are they had to spend a lot of time and energy. There's so much labor, and that would give them the additional value, isn't it? Not the original material value only, but they would add more value to make it beautiful, finish it beautifully, polish it. And also one thing we can think about is the want for, desire for expression. It all started from Homo sapiens, I explained before. It's even in a Paleolithic time, they did this drawing and, you know, all kinds of expressions, which is useless for daily living. So many reasons you can think of it. And did I explain about those Magatama shape? Originates probably from the fangs, wolf fangs, wolves. And that's a symbol of the power, symbol of the fearful power, big power that could take your life easily. And so they were aware of it, and they had this image and concept, but they made it into the form. And actually, they started out from the real thing, real fang of the wolves were perforated and wore by some people at the beginning. And that you know, fangs would not last for a long time. That's organic material. But if you use stones like this, you know, it will last longer and looks more beautiful too. You know. So there should be many reasons. But before that, let's have another break. It's 5:45, so let's have 10 minutes, another 10 minutes break. Okay. Any question? All right. Okay. More pictures. Okay. There's so much material that they use for secondary tools. And clay, of course, starts with a pottery and some specific type of pottery like this hole and fringe parts. 有孔つば付き土器って言うんですね、日本語で。有孔は穴がある。有孔つばがついてる。有孔つば付き土器。hole and fringe parts that I told you already. And this has this fringe. Always have a flat top, very simple flat top, no decoration at all on the rim. And all the fringe, and by the fringe, they always have this hole, these hole perforations. And these are more clear ones, you know, the flat top. And since in early time, many years ago, when they found this in one of the sites in Nagano Prefecture, they found from inside of the pot, they found this charred seeds of wild grape. So they naturally imagined about the winemaker, brewing vessels. Eh? And and they insisted that German people were brewing wine in this particular pot, and these particular design was aimed at this function, brewing function. And later on, there's another theory that arose, and other people would say, "Oh, these are used as drums." The animal skin would be placed on top, and these holes were for fixing the skin with the pegs punched in. And actually, there are some people who reconstruct them as drums and do the performance, musical performance too. And they got CDs out, I think, too. And well, it could be used for a drum. You can produce drum sound. And so it's still an argument going on about the function of these two vessel pots. And I'm on the brewing side, not because I like to drink, but one of the reasons is that evidence that they had this grape seeds inside one time from one site. And also there's another evidence that many of these fringe pots were painted red. You can't see it here, but most of them were painted red, probably lacquer paint. And those pigments would go into those holes, perforated holes. You can see the red paints inside the hole. And if they were to be used as drums and the pegs were punched in, you don't just stick in, just push in real hard, rotating and things. And the paint would come off if you push the pin in, But many of the examples with the paints show remaining paints inside the hole. So probably that's why they're insisting that these were used for brewing instead of drumming. Anyway, we don't have the answer yet. You can imagine. All right. And there are various forms too. Normally it's kind of big one, but sometimes they got small ones, like a very hand size, like 15 centimeter diameter and maybe 10 centimeter height. Tiny pot of this type would exist. And you would contain liquids, but you would not use it for drums. But we don't know, because there are clay drums in India, traditional clay drums in India that sometimes show very tiny ones too. So we don't know. All right. And the famous one with the clay material is figurines, human figures. They're made of clay and baked. And in many cases, well, we don't always find these. Like ICU campus, we've been digging for over 60 years, but we found only one or two fragments, and one complete exhibited in the museum. And these are normally found broken in pieces. And well, of course, those potteries were always found broken, so probably the same story. But we assume that these were intentionally broken before being abandoned. So it was probably used in some kind of ceremonial activities, or ritual activities. And in that process, they were broken on purpose and abandoned. That's what we assume now. And by the way, these figurines you're looking at right now are from one side, from one pit, large pit, and everything was abandoned in that pit in Yamanashi Prefecture. So amazing site. We haven't found any other site like this. It's a concentration of artifacts and figurines. Okay, one of the earliest figurines look like this, incipient Jomon or earliest Jomon. And it's the torso, upper body, you know, it ends with a hip. And you got breasts, but nothing else, you know, shoulder, breasts, oops, how come? Shoulder, breast, waist, hip, and that's all. And obviously woman figure, female figure, but you don't see anything else. It's a very simple one. But obviously it's not a daily use tool, you know, for anything. You cannot use it for anything. And a little later, early part of Middle Jomon, this is from the huge site, Sannai Maruyama site. And in northern part, in that time, they were making still two-dimensional type of figurine. You know, it's a plaque, cross-shaped plaque of clay, and something added, breasts and stomach, symbol of stomach sticking out, and probably represents the pregnant woman. And face, or we may not call it a face. It could be a mask. This figurine is wearing a mask. That's one possibility that we're always talking about now, these days. And but still, the expression, decoration is very simple. But it becomes more three-dimensional from Middle Jomon period. And this is in Nagano Prefecture. There are so many figurines made and found in Nagano and Yamanashi, the mountain area, where things were most fertile in Jomon period. 豊かだったとこですね. And this is three-dimensional, the stomach sticking out. Oops, wow. And breasts, and this center line from the chest to the stomach, supposed to represent this pregnant lines. You know, when you get pregnant, the stomach is extended heavily, so it shows crack, vertical cracks. You know, 妊娠線っていうんですね. Pregnant lines. Probably one of those lines were represented by this kind of decoration. And the face is always kind of strange, you know, there's fox-like eyes, you know, and stylized mostly. Sometimes you don't even have face expression either. This is another type in Nagano Prefecture. This was amazingly found complete, in complete shape. It was not broken. It's a big one. Over 40 centimeter, I think, and has a stomach sticking out, you know. And it looks like she has a certain type of hair style, and at the top of the head is flat, and you will see a spiral design on top. So it's like aなんていうのかね, and I don't know the term in English, but 曲げっていうんですか? You bundle your hair, long hair, bundled and swirl shape. And could be the specific hairstyle of that time. This is kind of strange one, you know. It doesn't have any face expression. Some head dressing, boshi kana, hat or something like that, head dressing on it. And this shoulder expression, chest expression is kind of weird too. It's kind of sticking out, maybe breasts, but so stylized. You see, the stomach's still sticking out, but it's kind of pointed, you know. And you have this center line and long legs. This is rare in the Jomon case. They always have short legs. And very good style. It's like a modern model or something. And this is from also Nagano Perfection, Jomon. There's a cute face. But it looks like one board, flat board. So it could be a mask instead of a face. He's wearing a mask, probably, he or she. Has 7 fingers. The body's lost, broken, so can't tell the whole image, but and this is rare. This is only one example ever found from outskirts in Tokyo, Tama area. And it's a pity that the head's missing of her. You know, she's feeding baby. She's sitting this manner and feeding her baby right in her arms. Left hand right here, right arms over the baby. And you see the baby face too, and breasts. It's amazing, you know. So there are so many types and forms and styles. Depends on the time and area. And even one area, in one area, they may not follow the same fashion. And so much in variety. It's kind of different from pottery design, you know, so much variety even in one area. And this is different too. This is in northern Kanto area, Gunma prefecture. And we call them heart-shaped dogu, but it's really stylized. Our entire body is really stylized, you know, so slender, and arms and hands are so stylized, and legs too. Legs kind of represent, is similar to the long-legged one that we've seen right now. And stomach is not really sticking out, you know, anymore, but still you have the center line and tiny breasts sticking out. So still female figure, but we don't really know what that is. Covered with minute lines, may represents the cloth. In other part of a little northern areas, northern Kanto to southern Tohoku area, in late Jomon, that they started to make more and more figurines in this time period. And sticking out stomach, center line, and wearing something, you know, pants or whatever. And you see, these might be ear ornaments, you know, round things stuck in your earlobe. You know, I'll show you about examples of the ornaments later. And this is a rare one too. So many rare stuffs, you know. They seem to have no style, designated style or anything. You know, many types appear. And these are seating figure, and the arm with the arms across, like this, you know. And some would say, "Oh, she's praying for something." But now we believe that this is also related to the fertility, and she's giving birth to the baby. And you know, the sitting position labor giving birth is one of the practice of the certain culture. And even in Japan, they used to do this. You know, it's easier for the mother because the gravity helps babies to come down. You know, in this position, it's easier than lying down. And but she would be so unstable in sitting position. And they used to hold other people, like husband or other people would used to hold her from the back or something, you know, to stabilize. The other method is to grab to the rope or something suspended from the ceiling, from top, you know, there's a rope. So probably she's doing that. She's holding onto the rope and holding her position and holding her stability while she's giving birth. And the latest Jomon, there are so much other stylized ones. But you see this expression of arms, you know, sticking down was shown in the heart-faced ones too. So it has some similarities in style. And the hips sticking out like this, you know, so many other types bear the same shape, same kind of shape. And look at this hairstyle. It's really complicated and interesting. Look like Sazae-san, and those faces are all stylized and wearing big ear ornament, as you see, huge ornaments. But you wouldn't be surprised if you see the real thing, real ornaments as artifacts later, because we have the big ones too, actually. And it looks like they're wearing pants, you know, expressed with a code marking. And we can't really tell if they are male or female, but probably female. Because a lot of female wore this big ear ornaments and those hairstyles for female, I guess. And this is the latest form of figurine in Jomon period. This is probably one of the famous, most famous ones, and developed in Aomori Prefecture, northern Japan. Because towards the latest Jomon period, you know, the decline of the temperature, decline of environment was so harsh in other parts, and we don't find sites of this time period even in Tokyo area, Kanto district. The decline of the number of the sites are so prominent, and but in northern part they were still surviving, and they were developing this kind of very elaborate decoration on pottery and figurine. And remember the latest pottery of this area has a black, shiny, polished design, elaborate erasing technique right here, you see, is adopted. And many people, normal people, would believe that this is a Uchujin, a spaceman or something, you know, wearing helmet or something like that. But we don't think so. This may represent something like a goggle that was used and being still used in the northern races, like Eskimos living in snow and ice. And we call this in Japanese shakoki dogu っていうんですね。shakoki っていうのは goggle ですね。goggle that prevents the light. That's the meaning of shakoki ですね。And this goggle look like this. And you tie it with a string on your hand. And it's made of wood normally, but in the case of Eskimo. And you have fine slit right here, straight slit. Only opening is the slit. And this is it. And in that kind of environment with snow and ice, you know, white, and the reflection from the sunlight is so hard, you know, coming from all over and get your eyes, and you wouldn't be able to see well in distance. And so you wear this slitted goggle, and the slit, this is a cross section of the goggle, something like that. And you see through the slit, and you still can see the distance, but all the light coming from all the direction would not come into your eyes. Directly. It's prevented by this goggle, and only the straight light would come into your eyes, all the way to your eyes. Eh? So by prevention of the reflection of the sunlight, they use this kind of goggle so you can see the distant object. And you see this figurine of the Aomori looks just like that. You see the slits. So probably that's one of the system they also had in Jomon time in the northern part of the area where you have a lot of snow in winter. Okay, and also you have to realize this wrist and ankle, it's tight. You know, it looks as if he's wearing heavy clothes, maybe made of leather or something, you know, jacket, or whole body is covered with some cloth, but the wrist is tight like this to prevent the cold air to come in. You have that system even today, right? In the winter jacket, you can squeeze the wrist and ankle part to prevent anything to come in. So probably this is one of the realities that they could show in that area called Northern area. All right. So as you've seen, so many types of figurines were made in Jomon time, especially in the latter half of the period. And we can't really define the function of those figurines. Probably there are various functions, depends on the time and area. But the main thing is that most of them are expressing the female figure, and we don't find any male figure. Some insist that there are some only countable of male figure, but they are not male figures. Now, because those figurines that they claim that they're male has this organ, sexual organ, penis sticking out, but it's not sticking out in front of the figurine. It's sticking out from between the legs. And that means it's not the penis, but it's a baby giving birth. And that's also representing that they're all female figures. Maybe not, we don't know. Maybe some are male, but most of them are female figure, I would say. So naturally, we would imagine that they have something to do with the fertility symbol to give birth, a lot of birth to babies, And that was one of their biggest tasks as an animal or creature on the earth. And surely that was very important. You know, if you can't have babies, you would cease to be. You will be extinct, you know. And they couldn't do that, of course. So that's one thing, the major concern, or one of the major concerns of German people, of course. And other thing is that, as I mentioned, many of those were found broken, and probably we would say they were broken intentionally through ceremony or ritual or whatever. And by breaking means giving death to the figurine. And that also reminds us of this rebirth concept, you know. And potteries must be broken, or doesn't have to be broken, but dumped in the rebirth place once and give rebirth when they start making the new set of pottery and something like that. And those figurines, the symbol of fertility, has to be broken and abandoned once to give real birth. That's one of the concepts. There's another theory about this breakage. That is, these representation of actual human beings. And for example, if you go out for hunting or other activities and get injured, get hurt, like broken arms, broken legs, and come back to your village in all pain and everything, so much trouble. There's no medication, you know, there was no doctor, actual doctor at the time. And what they would do is to go for a ritual magic, or, you know, by shaman or other people. That's all they could do. But you have to at least release your strain, spiritual strain. Maybe not the physical one, but at least you can release the stress, you know, of the injured guy or people. And in order to do that, probably used those figurines. And if he broke his left arm, then you would break the left arm of the figurine, and you replace the injury to the figurine from the human. You know, that kind of. これは英語でなんていうかな。日本語ではね、in Japanese it's called 片白というんですね。あ、字が出てこないな。違う。あ、そうか。形ですね。片白。片白っていうんですね。その身代わりです。in place of yourself, the form of in place. And instead of yourself, figurine gets all the unhappiness, all the injury, all the pain and things like that. And that could be one ritual activities they could have done. And that's why they were broken in pieces. Not in pieces, but, you know, always broken on purpose. That's one other theory. And probably both are right, and both would not be the only function of figurine. And there are many cases, I guess, you know, and there could be more functions that we have not imagined yet, you know. So, but it's really interesting that they did not make male figurine, you know. And as a fertility symbol, they have to have this male symbol too, but they did make that in stone instead of clay. Oop. Okay, this is another latest Jomon figurine. We don't really know if this is figurine or not. It doesn't look like anything, you know. It's a monster-like thing. Looks like a face, maybe 2 legs or shoulder only. You know, it's so stylized, and you can't really represent. It doesn't represent the human beings either. But so this is a final form in the Yamanashi area. We don't really know about this one. It's hollow inside, as you can see. You know, you can't make it solid, because the big things, if you make big things with the clay solid, it's very hard to bake, and it's hard to dry it. You know, it takes time to dry it perfectly, and even when you're baking, it will go broke. And so they try to make it thinner so that you can make it better, in better shape. And there's so much other clay material, but I think it's time. So we will continue about the secondary tools, starting from this masks and stone material and ornaments and so forth. All right, and then into the final transition period from Jomon period to Yayoi period. There will be a big difference between two cultures. All right, so let's wrap it up for today, and please write comments and questions as always. And I think I gave you a full day, almost full day time for writing comments, and I would do so. And also, as I mentioned today earlier, we have more spare time, I guess, in this class. Please let me know if you need more explanation about certain contents that I have gone already. And any other requests to spend time, you know, any demonstration or whatever, you know, if you want to see more of me making stone tools, I can do that too. And also, oh, I forgot, just a minute, I made the cord out of, oh, wait a minute. To finish watching this, I made this cord from strips of tissue paper. It was only 2 strips of thin tissue paper that you will notice, you know? So it's weak paper, very fragile paper. And I made this cord out of 2 strands of those. And I tried to break it by pulling hard. I can't. This is so hard. This is so strong. Just by twisting, motion of twisting the fibers or paper or whatever, it becomes so strong. It's just a tissue paper, but since it's been twisted, it's so strong. Maybe 2 male would not be able to break it. I'm not acting. So this is another function of those cords, make it strong. And so you can use it for tying things. And if you make it thicker and thicker by twisting over and over again, and you could make rope, fat rope, so that they could use it for all kinds of construction work, like erecting huge poles. You know, you need to have a lot of long rope. And that's how they did. And they did spend so much time and effort, energy for making ropes too. You know, it was so important things for them, as you can see. Okay, I forgot to show you the strength of the chords. All right, so I'll see you next week and work hard on your reports. I'm looking forward to reading your interesting reports, and has to be amusing. Okay, all right, I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome.
See you tomorrow.
All right, all right. Yeah. I'm giving a lecture in Japanese tomorrow afternoon from 2 o'clock. Yeah, a lot of work. Work hard.